Good evening and welcome to another Unity in the Community event brought to you by the Valley Martin Luther King Committee. My name is David Morgan, President and CEO of Team Incorporated, and I am deeply honored to be tasked by the MLK Committee to serve as moderator. Once again, the MLK Committee has put together a unique approach and program. It's first time utilizing a live video platform of panelists and live attendees with engagement and participation from the youth and public at large, both prior to tonight's event, as well as additional opportunities tonight to submit questions during the event. Just 15 months ago, the MLK Committee unveiled the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Bust on Main Street in front of Ansonia City Hall, and was rightly recognized as the most unique MLK bust in the entire state of Connecticut and beyond. The vision was initially put forth by Valley Youth, and the memorial bust was the result of the Valley MLK Committee's multi-year strategy and mission to, quote, memorialize the transformative legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and to inspire the Valley communities with love, equity, justice, and compassion for all Valley residents. It was also a very sobering experience and reminder of Dr. King's question that still rings today. Where do we go from here? And like the MLK bust in the Valley, tonight's event titled, quote, a panelist dialogue on equity, justice, and compassion for all, listening to our youth, end quote, is a result of the vision and ideas of Valley Youth and the MLK Committee. One of our panelists tonight, Malika Mosley-Williams, not only helped lead in crafting tonight's program, but led in the outreach and collection of tonight's questions for the 5 panelists. More than a dozen questions from our Valley youth and the public at large are here tonight. This is not a one-time experience. With tonight being its first time in this format, the MLK Committee envisions a series of panelist presentations and Q&A. Tonight's goals are twofold. Number one, listening to the Valley youth and learning how community leaders and stakeholders can be helpful and supportive in the work and advocacy ahead. This includes creating outlets and platforms for their messaging and work, and the importance of continuing forward so Valley youth can continue to voice their situations, concerns, and solutions for the future. Number two, effectively demonstrate meaningful engagement and dialogue and a commitment to productive discourse, ensuring inclusive opportunities for all to provide questions and answers, while at the same time effectively demanding and addressing change and solutions to existing inadequacies and inequalities. Tonight's format includes more than a dozen questions already received over the last 10 days due to the MLK Committee's engagement of Valley youth and the public at large. I will present the question to specific members of the panel tonight and ask they respond for no more than 4 minutes. Panelists, I may give a gentle wave as your time expires, indicating and requesting you to put closure on your response, as I want to honor the time and all the questions from our live attendees tonight. Attendees, throughout tonight, you have the opportunity to type a new question by clicking on the box at the bottom of the screen. We have Lisa Savoyd and Jillian Ruisi of Team, whom will be looking out for collecting questions. With the remaining time, I may pose your question to the panel for a response. If we run out of time and have remaining questions, please know the MLK Committee envisions a series of these panelist events and your questions will be carried forward. Now, please allow me to briefly highlight tonight's panelists, and then I will immediately jump into the first question. Our first panelist is Breon Sanders, Unit Director of the Joel E. Smilo Clubhouse Boys and Girls Club in Ansonia for the last 4 years. Breon is a lifetime Valley resident dedicated to making a difference in the lives of young people, and Breon eagerly fights for equality for all. Mr. Sanders is also Vice President of the NAACP Valley Chapter and is youth pastor of the Back to the Bible Outreach Center. Our second panelist is Chief Andrew Cota III, Chief of Police, City of Ansonia Police Department. Chief Coda has been the chief of the Ansonia Police Department since February 2019 and has been a police officer in the city of Ansonia for 28 years. Our third panelist is Malika Mosley Williams, president of the Valley NAACP Youth Chapter. Malika is also a recent graduate of Ansonia High School and is currently a student at the University of Hartford. Ms. Mosley Williams has spoken at multiple events, including the MLK Committee's Peace Rally on Main Street in front of City Hall and the MLK bust this past June. Our fourth panelist is Superintendent of Ansonia Public Schools, Dr. Joe DeBacco. Joe became superintendent in July 2019. In his career, he has served as a special education teacher, an assistant principal, and principal. Joe came to Ansonia in 2017 as the assistant superintendent. Joe's greatest accomplishment is taking over a failing Title I elementary school, and upon his departure for Ansonia, that same failing school was recognized as a school of distinction by the State Department of Education. Our fifth and final panelist is Pastor Nikki Harville, serving Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Oxford since 2017. Pastor Nikki is also chairperson of the Valley Interfaith Council and is the dean of the Naugatuck Valley Conference for the ELCA. Pastor Nikki has dedicated work with interfaith dialogue, youth engagement, and empowerment, and social justice. I will now jump in to the first of many questions tonight and ask Mr. Breon Sanders to respond. Thank you. Mr. Sanders, how is diversity, equity, and justice being met in the Valley community that is primarily made up of white citizens? How will people of color be injected in positions that prove a willingness to meet the goals of this dialogue?
Change, that's another good place to start. Yeah, you know, we can start there. We can always start there with the change.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Our second question is for Chief Coda, Andy. How do you plan on improving the relationship the police officers have with the Ansonia community?
So there's actually multiple ways. We've been doing that or trying to do that for years. But as an example, we've been, for a few years now, we've had our officers visiting all of our schools, primarily our high school, where our young adults are starting to get ready to spread their wings to go out into the world, college, the work world and such. So we've brought them on board and we've opened up a dialogue with our schools to discuss any topics of any concern. Luckily, it starts off kind of slow, but then it opens up and we find a subject that interests everybody and it opens dialogue. So that's one of the things we're doing. We have officers, we are continuing to work toward moving to get officers out of the cruisers, out of the police cars more and get into neighborhoods. Although sometimes that's a little difficult based on call volume, but we're always looking toward improving that, getting them into neighborhoods where neighbors and residents are asking for officers to get out and have a conversation or see the kids in a neighborhood, whatever it is, to get out there to know our community a little bit better. Some of the other things that we've done that we currently do and we've done in the past, we every year we host a shopping spree with a group of kids from our school system for families that may need a little extra help. We do that. We have coffee with a cop. I also personally, since I've become chief, and you could ask any officer if you saw him or her out on the street, I talk to my officers every day when I end emails, when I send stuff about respect and dignity for our citizens, dealing with everybody equally and treating people with compassion. So that's one of the things that I push as the chief is make sure that you're treating everybody fairly. Although people may not agree with the outcome of a particular case, if there's a matter that is done, at least they'll be able to say the police officers treated them with dignity and respect. And that's really one of the major things that we're working to do to become better community members. My next hope, my future plan here, as you know, we're getting a new police department on Main Street. And hopefully this COVID virus will go away and allow us to use our community room to bring people into our domain, the police department, and we can discuss more things, to open up a dialogue about what is it that our police do or don't do, or how we see things, to continue this dialogue outside of setups like this or anywhere. We'd like to be able to do that, provide people training, let them know how we work behind the scenes, so they can understand our systems. So that's our big thing, is communication. We are part of the community. We want to be part of the community, and we're going to continue to move forward in that respect of opening up a dialogue with anybody that would like to have that.
Thank you, Chief. Next question is for you, Malika. This individual has a 4-year-old daughter that naturally does not see color, just people. The questioner says, I read her books like, quote, We March, other books, Same Difference, and Sesame Street's We're the Same, We're Different, We're Beautiful. How do I explain the topic of racial inequality to my 4-year-old who does not see people by color?
So I think that's an interesting phrase, not really seeing people by color. I think we as human beings, we all see color. It's one thing to see people by color, and it's another thing to recognize that we have differences. So in this case, what I see is that when she says that I don't see people by color, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Malika. Yeah, you have a little echo. It was coherent, but you might have a second.
Yeah.
And their audio's pinging off of your audio. Thank you. Question number 4 is for you, Chief Cota. Excuse me, Joe DeBacco. With the current climate going on, and the next 2 questions are for you, Dr. DeBacco, so you may want to answer them both together or one at a time, your choice. The first question, with the current climate going on, how do you plan on revising your curriculum to cover other races' history? And the second question, are you willing to utilize people outside of the Board of Education to assist in the creation of a new curriculum?
Well, I'm going to take one at a time, and I will speak for Ansonia first and then try to make something generalizable to the Valley, because I know this conversation, you're speaking to me and I'm in Ansonia, but this is not just an Ansonia thing. This is a Valley conversation. So when it comes to revising curriculum, I can tell you what we're doing here in Ansonia. My last year's Alliance grant, I carved out $40,000 to do a curriculum audit. The reason why I wanted to do a curriculum audit was to evaluate overall our curriculum and to see if there's gaps and holes, but most importantly, to see if our curriculum and how we can incorporate more culturally responsive and look at our curriculum to make it more representative of the cultures and races that I have in my buildings and within our schools. That's one thing we're looking at, when it comes to our curriculum. I can't speak for other districts, but I can also tell you that we are the only district in the Valley that has a community service requirement for graduation. So Martin Luther King Jr. community service requirement. There are things that we can do. So, and I don't want to jump ahead, but if our curriculum is more racially appropriate and represents the cultures that we have in our schools, I don't want to jump ahead, but it wouldn't just be 1 month a year where you would talk about Black history. It would be something that's embedded into our curriculum year long. But I don't want to jump ahead. And then the next question you said to me, am I willing to utilize people outside the board? The answer is yes. And there's a couple ways we could utilize people outside the Board of Ed, but I can tell you how you can make the biggest impact. Well, how we utilize people outside the Board of Ed, first of all, usually high school seniors, when you do a curriculum audit, they survey seniors to determine what classes are of the greatest interest. And they then survey graduates to say, what classes helped you out the most? And what classes could have been or should have been added that could help you either in your college quest, in your quest in the military or in work life, or what could have helped you in life and in general. And those are the kinds of questions postgraduates, and that kind of information is essential in how we can then gain information to influence curriculum. But if you really want to know the biggest impact you could have is when every Board of Education has a curriculum committee, and make your voice heard at those curriculum committees. But what I would like to do is I would like to see more racial equity throughout the Valley on our boards of education. So if you want to know how your voice could really be heard, is becoming a member of the Board of Ed. And one thing I would jump on to Brother Breon's, how we can infuse people in different areas. We could use more people, especially young people, getting involved and see if we can get them on either boards of education or on their civic boards, because that's where you could best assist and best have the greatest impact on getting people from outside the board who are now on the board to help influence and support curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. DeBacco. Breon, do you want to briefly comment regarding, opportunities for boards of education, perhaps through the lens of your own personal experience or of the NAACP, on how to develop more diverse boards of education, to Joe's point?
We are actually working on that now with our subcommittees in the NAACP. So, of course, one of our subcommittees do deal with education. We have already, of course, met with Joe DeBacco, Dr. Joe DeBacco, and a bunch of other superintendents in the Valley. So we are actually in the process of making that change.
All right, question number 6, Pastor Nikki. And again, chair of the Valley Interfaith Council. Pastor Nikki, what do you believe is or can be the role of faith leaders in the dialogue and in actionable efforts to make progress toward ensuring equity, inclusion, diversity, justice, and compassion for all of our Valley residents?
That's a great question, and I'd love to answer it, but I wonder if we can just jump back to Malika, who I think got interrupted on her answer, and allow her some space to finish and then come back to this. Would that be okay?
Malika, did you not finish your answer?
No, I kind of got cut off because of the echo.
Oh, my bad. Oh,
All right.
look at me. My first and last time moderating anything. Go ahead, Malika, please. Thank you, Pastor.
So what I was saying about the seeing color is I think it's a great thing that she doesn't see color, but I think she also has acknowledged that we are different, and the best way to acknowledge those biases is by having those tough conversations. The question had mentioned that that parent was reading books such as Same Difference, We Are the Same, We're Different, We're Beautiful, and I think that's a great way to acknowledge the fact that we do have differences, but I think we should also acknowledge the fact that there are some biases. Being that she's 4 years old, maybe bring up topics such as things being unfair that can kind of relate to her, and just be really like gentle and very like not so much censored with how you answer the questions, but explain it in a way that she'd be able to understand. You can also utilize a lot of resources online, a lot of videos, and a lot of books that deal with racial inequality. That can also be helpful as well.
Thank you, Malika. And thank you, Pastor. Can do you want me to repeat the question? Happy to.
Sure, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Pastor Nikki, again, President, Chair of the Valley Interfaith Council. What do you believe is or can be the role of faith leaders in the dialogue and in actionable efforts to make progress toward ensuring equity, inclusion, diversity, justice, and compassion for all of our Valley residents?
Thank you. The first piece I want to address is the role of faith leaders in the beginning of that question. Certainly, it is going to vary depending on who that leader is. It's going to vary depending greatly on faith. But the 4 biggest pieces are going to be advocacy, education, empowerment, and activism. Faith leaders, especially in places like the Valley have a unique spot in the community. Frequently, the role of faith leaders is building relationships and bridges, building community together from all different aspects. It's not always just a geographic piece. It's not something where everyone shares the same job, and very frequently it's not something where everyone shares the same views. But the role of faith leaders then is to make sure that those key components of building relationship, of listening, not only to the needs of the community, but to who is involved maybe in that particular congregation. And I say congregation because in the Valley we are very heavily church-based or Christian-based as far as spirituality goes. But that role, again, also needs to be aware of their own racial bias or their own racial makeup. I cannot, of course, speak for all of the faith communities in the Valley. Each individual congregation, each individual community is going to have a different spot where they are called and where they are led. Faith leaders of different races building relationships with one another, and taking the lead from those who are people of color, and listening to where do we as faith communities need to be, because one of the biggest pieces where faith comes in is that regardless of what the particular community, building, denomination, religion, spirituality, it all comes down to this core value of justice and dignity and humanity. This is something that is a requirement of our faith, that we not only know one another, but that we lift up one another. It's not just about preventing those around us from hurting each other, but making sure that everyone has that dignity. One other piece that I do want to say, in addition to that bridge building and relationship component, is to use the power that faith leaders do have in those communities and structures. Like, for example, I had heard Dr. DeBacco saying, make your voice heard, and which is a wonderful thing. And that's a very specific role where faith leaders can help to stand alongside and to amplify voices that otherwise are not going to be heard. Also, the role of faith leaders can simply be to show up when things are happening in the community, show up when injustice is present, even when it's not like the top of the news stream. Show up when your neighbor needs you. It is we can sit back on regardless of who you are, because faith drives us and requires us to show up for one another. And then the last piece is just, especially for faith leaders like myself, who are in a position of privilege, especially, to hold others accountable, and to hold people in your community, in your own circles, accountable for their words, accountable for their actions, accountable for their inactions as well. But this is something you're not gonna see a lack of faith presence as this keeps moving. So
Thank you, Pastor Nikki, and thank you for bringing Malika back to the Q&A. Next question is for Chief Coda, City of Ansonia, Chief of Police Department. Chief Coda, Andy, do Ansonia officers wear body cameras? And if so, when and where? Is it in only certain cases or all throughout their entire shift?
So the answer to the question is yes. Ansonia police officers have body cameras. We've actually had them for just about 5.5 years now. That goes back under Chief Hale. We started looking into this and determined that it would be a good course of action. kind of saw that that's the direction policing was going. Why not get on board early, be early adopters of it, and allow those body cameras to allow us to capture what's going on. And I think the public expects that from us, you know, that there's I guess a third point of view, if you'd like to call it that, so that it's there. It's supposed to be an impartial point of view. So yes, we have those cameras. The officers wear them when they're on patrol. So do our detectives and any sergeants that are out on the road. The cameras are not on the entire shift. What they are on for are calls for service. So if an officer is sent to a neighborhood problem or a shoplifting, any case, once they're dispatched, they activate their camera, and that camera is on for the duration of the call for service. And then the officer, he or she, will then shut the camera down at the end of the call for service. That includes up to and including, I should say, transports into the police department or anywhere else for that matter. So anytime an officer is interacting with the public on a call for service, they have a body camera activated. But I'll also add, if you're just having a conversation with an officer and it's not related to a call for service, I'm walking a beat and I see you and we have a conversation. Hi, how are you? How's everything? That's not recorded. We record our calls for service. We still want people to feel comfortable to come up and talk to an officer about any subject they want, and maybe they're not ready to be recorded or something along those lines, or we have to tell them, listen, it's a call for service, and we'll activate our camera. But a normal conversation out on the road does not require activation.
Okay, thank you. Question number 8 is both for Malika as well as Breon. Again, Malika Mosley-Williams, president of the Valley NAACP Youth Chapter, and Mr. Breon Sanders, vice chair of the Valley NAACP. Question: what is the Valley chapter of the NAACP currently doing for Ansonia? And please feel free to expand on the neighboring Valley communities as well. And Breon, please.
So thank you so much for that question. The Valley NAACP has and will continue to meet with local leaders of the Valley, the mayors, the chief of police, the superintendent, to make sure that we are emphasizing the need to work together in creating an atmosphere where everyone is treated equally. We also are looking for people to join the fight for equality, like I said before, and encourage anyone who believes in the need for change to join us.
Malika?
The same thing with the youth chapter of the NAACP. What we're doing is ensuring that there's a comfortable environment for youth members and different youth of Ansonia and in other valleys. We're also promoting getting out to vote and then involvement in our community when it comes to community service as well, and creating equality.
Thank you. Chief Cota, City of Ansonia, Chief of Police. Question for you: is there in the works to bring a more diverse police department?
The answer to that question is yes. We're always trying to make our police department more diverse. In Ansonia, we usually hire in very small, I call them small batches. We don't have a lot of officers that leave all at once. We hire one officer or two at a time. And it's kind of a phase that happens once or twice a year, sometimes depending on eligibility for retirement. We don't have a lot of turnover as far as officers with a short amount of time leaving the department. It's generally from a retirement standpoint. So we are always looking to make our department more diverse to reflect our community. So we continue to do that. We do reach out to people, and as a matter of fact, I have 2 candidates that are in the pipeline right now. I actually have 2 openings, and we're lucky enough to find some certified officers, and I have one is non-minority and one is a minority officer that we hope to bring on in the very near future to get approved by our police commission and bring them on board. But yeah, as a continued work in progress, I will add that I have a son that works in our Boys and Girls Club over in Shelton, and he actually knows Breon pretty well, and I've known Breon for quite a few years. And there's always a communication pipeline. For some reason, we've had that opening. We've been able to talk, and that helps me sometimes get the pulse of the younger kids, not necessarily the little ones in the Boys and Girls Club, but the teens, to find out what the thoughts are and how we can do a better job of recruiting a police force that's more representative of our community. So we're always looking. Myself, and any officer are always willing to discuss with anybody and their concerns or questions about becoming a police officer in the city of Ansonia. We would gladly have that conversation. As I said earlier, I'll reach back to one of the answers I had before. That is one of my hopes as we get moving toward our new building, is allowing that to happen. Let people that are interested come see our department, come speak to us and see, do you want to be a member of the Ansonia Police Department? So that's how we do it now, and how we would hope to continue to move forward and recruit a more diverse police department.
Chief Coda, I'm going to do a follow-up question for you. Again, I want to thank Lisa and Jillian for pulling questions together from, we have close to 40 participants on tonight's event. This question's highly related to your response. What percentage of the police force is made up of people of color?
So at the current time, as we sit, I have 5% African-American, 5% Hispanic, and I'll also add in there, just as extra, 12% female officers in the police department at this time. And again, we're trying to fill 2 empty spots at this point, so those numbers are subject to change, but that's the percentage at the moment.
Next question is for you, Dr. DeBacco. What are you doing to make your staff and administration more diverse? Again, Dr. Joseph DeBacco, Superintendent, Ansonia Public Schools.
Once again, all right, David, I just want to say, thank you again, but I can only speak for Ansonia, but I'm going to try to help out and hopefully cover what hopefully some other districts could be doing as well. But I'm actually happier to report that we have the highest percentage of minority employees than we've had in the last 10 years. Right now, the highest percentage. It's not as high as Chief Coda's, but it's something that I would like to work on, and I have worked on, and I'm actually happy to report that a school just sent me an African-American female to be a social worker in one of my buildings, and I will approve that hire very quickly. She doesn't know that yet, but she's a finalist and she's coming to meet with me probably in the next couple of days. But the practices that we have employed, and I could tell you something that I have done and something that I will continue to do, is that I work with the local universities, and I have actually been trying to pluck applicants out of programs, sometimes even before they've even finished. And what I would do, and what I have done, is say, I asked the Connecticut State Department of Education, can I get them certified early? And most applicants would say, what do you mean? I can come out of school early and start working? And the answer is yes, but I have to fill out a bunch of paperwork, and then I have to fill something out called a DSAP. It's a durational shortage area provision paperwork, and I have to then sponsor that person and then provide personal support that I will support that person to ensure that they become a certified teacher. Have I done that? The answer is yes already, and I will continue to do it. We have a business teacher right now at Ansonia Middle School, and I was able to make sure this man was placed in our building to assist our students. I'm also very fortunate right now that when I did my dissertation, and my friend Reese Morales, who's actually an administrator in Bridgeport, is doing his superintendent internship with me. He's the first Hispanic male actually that's in my office and has been there, and he helps me post jobs on his on the Latino Facebook pages to make sure that I'm not only reaching out for Black and Latino applicants. I'm also happy to report that we've incorporated a bilingual family liaison to make sure that to assist our Spanish families. And that is some of the things that we're working on. I mean, and I will continue to really advocate and to reach out, and to be honest, to poach the best and brightest, applicants I can, and bring them here to make it more a better representation of what our school population looks like. And I'm not bashful about it. And I'm actually already reached out to a school in Brooklyn, and I'm working on something else. And my hope is we could do better, and we're going to do more. But it is year one, but it should only go up from this. But it's a constant. It's something that I look to do, and that's something I truly believe in. And I'm hoping that, and I have the support of the board, and I think that's what we should be looking at in the Valley, to make sure that our teaching population, just like Chief Cota said, his police population should be representative of our school population, or the population at large. And it's something that it's a continuing effort, and that's what we're working on.
Next question, Malika, this is a three-part question, but I'm going to ask each one separately. And again, Malika, recent graduate of Ansonia High School, currently a student at the University of Hartford and president of the Valley NAACP Youth Chapter. Malika, do you believe Ansonia has created a comfortable environment for you as an African-American young woman? What would you do to change what you have experienced thus far?
I think growing up, I did feel comfortable living in Ansonia. That could also be because I was a part of a lot of different things. So I was active in the community. But overall, I do think I'm in a comfortable environment. What would I change from what I've experienced thus far? In my op-ed, I wrote about an experience I had with a teacher who we differed in different beliefs when it regard issues such as like racism and blackface and things like that. So I think having a more diverse staff, having more African-American teachers in the building would be beneficial, and having a more diverse staff.
Follow-up question, Malika. Has there been any tension among your friends due to everything that has been going on lately? How do you deal with the difference in views among your friends?
So I'm fortunate enough to have a very diverse group of friends, and our views are very similar. So there hasn't been a lot of tension. I have gotten into some debates with peers over different things regarding like rallies and different protests and things like that. But there hasn't really been a lot of tension. It's mostly just open discussion. We're both open to hear each other's point of view. And then, with dealing with different views amongst my friends, we just talk about it, really.
And the last follow-up question, Malika, what do you do if your friends have a view that you agree with, but their parents' views differ?
If I had a friend and they agreed with my view, but their parents had a different opinion, I think it all depends on the friend I have and how close I am with their parent. I have some friends where I've never talked to their parents a day in my life, and there are other friends where I go to their house often and I speak to their parents. And in those cases, I'm able to talk to that parent. So if they had a view that differed from mine, we're usually able to talk about it as well or discuss things like that. Other than that, yeah, I haven't really been in a situation where I've had a parent's view different from mine.
Thank you. Next question is for both Breon and Joe. And Breon, I'd like to ask you to start. Again, Breon Sanders, Vice President of the NAACP Valley Chapter, Youth Pastor of the Back to the Bible Outreach Center, lifetime Valley resident, and Unit Director of the Jolie Smilo Clubhouse Boys and Girls Club in Ansonia for 4 years. Breon, why is Black History only mentioned in February?
I believe that America suffers from this thing called systemic racism. As a parent of 4 children, I learned about more than just watered down American history, or our history is an American history. So they learn it is for longer than shortest. It's the longest. It's the shortest. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I am definitely nervous.
Take your time. Take your time.
It is
Speak from the
definitely the
heart.
shortest month, one of the shortest months of the year, and we deserve more than just February to celebrate Black history. We should be teaching our children throughout the year about Black history and those who came, other than just Martin Luther King. It should be about Mr. Lewis, who recently passed away. It should be about Rosa Parks. It should be about all those who fought beside Martin Luther King. Those names that are not in the history books. Even the inventors who invented certain things in America who don't get enough play or don't get enough recognition. We should be teaching our children these things throughout the year. Garrett Morgan, Madam C.J. Walker. We should be teaching our children about these great men and women, Black, powerful men and women throughout the year. So that is what I believe, that we should be introducing these things all year, not just in February. And we do celebrate our Black history every day. Every day we represent and we celebrate our Black history. Although some may not, we do celebrate it each and every day. So that's what I had.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. When you speak from the heart, you're not nervous at all. Thank you. Dr. DeBacco.
No, I'd rather have Breon speak from the heart. I like that. And I would agree with Breon. First of all, it is the shortest month, and it doesn't do justice. But that's probably why our legislature actually passed the law to incorporate Black history and African American history and Hispanic history into our curriculum at the high school level. So it won't be just in February. It's actually a class that students can take. But Breon, you couldn't be more right as you speak. It's because you have 4, I have 3 little ones, and I can tell you my daughters want to be gymnasts, and I got one that said I want to be Simone Biles, and the other one who says, Daddy, I want to be Lori Hernandez. And you know what? Where do we find these books? Unless you come to Joe DeBacco's house, that's where you're finding them. But they shouldn't be just at my house. You know where they should be? They should be in our libraries, and they should be in our classrooms. The only way we can make sure they're in our classrooms is to really take a look at what we are teaching. And that's why I believe so firmly in this curriculum audit, to put $40,000 of money that comes in to making sure that we take a look at our curriculum. It's important to me. It's important because my daughters talk to me about it. My daughters, I'm a father of mixed race children, and guess what? When they come to me, they want to see people that look like, Daddy, I want to be a ballerina. You know what? Where are these books in our schools and in our classrooms? And you know what? I have to give my daughters an explanation. So is it just Black history is one month and that's it? I'm sorry, it can't be. I have three little ones that look at me every day, and I'm compelled to do something different. I can't speak about the other districts in the Valley, but if we could make our Black history just our history, and it's something that's talked about throughout the year, that's something we could work on. And it's something that I'm not saying it just because I'm on this video. It's something I believe and I have to live every day. So, and I think through the help and through the conversations and hopefully people getting on our curriculum committees, we can help move things along and make things, our teaching more vibrant and more encompassing. But that's me speaking also from the heart because my kids pull at it every day. So I thank you for that question.
Next question. Chief Coda, and then I'm also going to ask Mr. Breon Sanders to answer this as well. Chief Coda, what are your thoughts on community policing, involving communities to do more to police their own communities?
Well, I think that community policing is an important concept for all communities. What that community policing looks like should be dictated by the needs of each individual community. I'll go back to what Dr. DeBacco said. When I speak, I can speak for Ansonia. I can't speak for other communities per se, because Ansonia is the only one that I'm actively involved in, that I work in every day. So I speak from that point of view. Many people have a different idea of what community policing may be. It may be that officers are out of their cars, walking through neighborhoods, always working, to solve problems, maybe without arrests, deal with social issues. In some places, they think that that's not a police officer's job in their job description to deal with social issues, but get other resources for them and leave the police portion out of it. I think that the answer to, I think the second part is involving communities to do more to police their own communities. I think the answer is in the title, community policing. It's two pieces. It's the community and it's the police. And you can't have one without the other. You need, police are there to protect and serve the community and respond to their community's needs. But the police also need the community to respond to them, so we can figure out exactly what path our community wants us to take, or to how they want us to interact. So it's a moving target there at all times, because you need to be able to have a good communication and find out where does your community stand in their support of police, and where do your police stand in support of the community. I think that this forum is part of that. This is what we're trying to do. This is where there's a nice panel here of everybody that has different expertise of what is it that our community is looking for. Our leaders, our managers, our superintendents, our police chiefs, our pastors, and our young adults that are coming in, that are going to be the future. So this is where it begins. So this is how we go about community policing, working together as a group to solve our community problems. Just because it's community policing doesn't mean it has to be solved by police alone. It means we have to do it as a group together to get a proper solution to the issue at hand. We always look for our community to be involved, and that's one of the things it's always been difficult for police departments, is getting the community to give them information, because there's different dynamics in every city, every town. In order to get information, your community has to believe in and trust their police to give them information. When I'm speaking of that, specifically to crimes generally, and certain issues in neighborhoods. So we have to continue this dialogue and further dialogue to get our community on board, so we can do this together and resolve whatever community issue it may be. Or at a minimum, the police can provide a direction for another resource that can help resolve these. We don't, the answer is not always you need to be arrested, or there's a police action. We can do other things, and that involves dialogue and working with everybody.
Mr. Breon Sanders, Vice Chair, Valley NAACP.
Hi, so awesome answer, by the way, Chief Coda. I definitely agree. When we talk about the community policing the police, I think that it is definitely needed. It's definitely necessary in our valley, in Ansonia, of course. I think that we will see a significant change when we start to hold our police departments accountable for what the police do. I also do believe that we should never have a situation where we have a George Floyd issue, or we have
Breon, you accidentally muted yourself just now.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Where we have any injustice that happens within our police. I think also that we should hold our neighbors accountable for what they do as well. I don't know if that makes sense, but I believe that we shouldn't just plead police to police, but we should also hold our neighbors accountable. If we can de-escalate a situation before the police get there, or if maybe they won't even have to be called, that's something that we should do. Being able to hold our brothers and our sisters that live right next door to us accountable for what's happening. Yes, we're not saying put yourself in harm's way. We're not saying that. What we're saying is, if you can do it, if you have that power, if you have that voice, go ahead and try to de-escalate that. That way we don't have to call on the police to come out and deal with a situation that we've already de-escalated. So I do believe that we definitely need to police our police, but we also need to hold our neighbors accountable for what happens.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Next question. Malika, I'm going to ask you to answer this, and then Brianna, I'd like to ask you to also answer this. Malika, how do you feel about people joining the Black Lives Matter movement, quote, supporting, end quote, the movement as a trend?
So I think the word trend is an interesting one. It kind of insinuates that eventually everyone's kind of going to move on from it, or that the trend will eventually die. And for that reason, I don't really agree with anyone trying to support or join the movement as a trend. This is really an ongoing battle. Either you're all in or you're all out. Being in between or doing something to make yourself look good isn't helping anyone, really, unless you're really out there actively trying to make a change, signing petitions or speaking out, or actually trying to make some sort of difference in your community. You're treating the movement as a joke, and in my opinion, there's nothing funny or trendy about it.
Mr. Sanders?
Malika. I mean, what else is there to say? That was it. She nailed it. Listen, it's either are you real about this or are you faking it? You know, don't put Black Lives Matter on your shirt if you really don't mean it. You know, if you don't understand what it means, reach out to somebody who does understand what it means. Maybe they can explain to you what the movement is about. We are not out here trying to spread hate. We're not out here trying to spread you know, put out war on the streets or anything like that. We're trying to bring people together. We are also not telling you by saying Black Lives Matter that white lives don't matter. What we're saying is right now, Black Lives Matter. It's our house that's on fire. Help us put out our house. I seen an interesting post on, I think it was Facebook, where a person was trying to explain to a white person, a Caucasian person, that about the All Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter, which is if a house is on fire, the fire department will be called and they will put out that house. That's like looking in someone's house who's not on fire, comes down the street and says, "Hey, listen, what about my house? Put my house fire out." Well, your house is not on fire right now. So right now, the Black community, this is the house that's on fire. So help us put out our house. The trend. I do agree with Malika on that. Again, she nailed it. I don't agree with people jumping on just for the trend. Again, if you're in this movement, go ahead and jump in and help us make a change and help us make a difference. You know, either that or sit down.
Thank you. And that's the last of the questions that primarily Malika took the lead role in collecting as we solicited and announcing this event 10 days ago. And so now for the panelists, I'm going to move over to some of the questions that were posed during tonight's event. And really want to thank Jillian and Lisa again for trying to package these together so I can read them out. So Pastor Nikki, this question I'm going to ask you to respond to. Churches have always been segregated. How do you see the church making peace with its past and moving to be unsegregated and promote and moving forward to promote equity and equality, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think a lot of it goes back to knowing the history of churches in this country. A lot of that is because you know, that the Holy Scriptures were changed and adjusted and edited to make sure that slaves who were here did not hear that God wanted liberation, and that God was on the side of the people, right? So it goes back that far. In some denominations, and I can speak for my own denomination, you know, all throughout all of my seminary education, learning about the history of Black Lutheranism were always elective courses and never part of that core curriculum, right? That same kind of curriculum problem that we see systemically in public schools. For myself, I can speak and say that I think the first step is in acknowledging that there is systemic racism, even in organized religion, and that some of that segregation is because of those systems. It is because of privilege, and some of it is to allow for the spirit to move. But we have to acknowledge the sins of our present and our past, and that's going to be the first step. We can't just put out something that says, hey, we're gonna be more diverse by 2021. That's not how this is gonna work. So that's my short on the fly answer, at least.
Thank you, Pastor Nikki, and again, President of the Valley Interfaith Council. Next question, Dr. DeBacco, Ansonia Superintendent, Ansonia Public Schools. Joe, there is a system in place for youth, quote, prison pipeline, end quote, whose aim is to destroy the community of color. How do you suppose this can be changed? And who are you soliciting to ensure that this change has strength?
Well, it's very interesting this question was asked. I did my dissertation on out-of-school suspension of minority males in the school to prison pipeline. So it's very funny that someone would ask me about this, because this is something that has always been close to my heart, and I spent, I don't know, many years. I should have spent less years writing my dissertation, but it took me a while. But anyway, what can be done? Well, first of all, I would love to mess up the A plus B equals C, which you're asking, the school to prison pipeline. If you look at a minority male, Hispanic or African American, a male who gets suspended, if you look at those who get suspended, they have an increased chance of getting expelled. And those students who are suspended or expelled, especially young men of color, lower socioeconomics, have the most increased chance of being incarcerated. So that's what is meant by the school to prison pipeline. But I would love to mess up that school to prison pipeline, because we don't need to have a pipeline to prison. That's not what schools were meant to do. And I like messing up the status quo when it comes to that. So number one, I can tell people, when it comes to violence, drugs, or weapons, schools have no choice but to move forward when it comes to things like that. But there also are sliding scales, and there's things that we could do. Not everything that comes to my office needs to get referred to the courts. We have what is called the JRB, the Juvenile Review Board, which we could utilize. We also have diversion programs, and we also have a way that we could use restorative discipline, where you have to restore what you did in the community. And if you could restore what you did, then you have met your obligation by meaning, if you disturbed or destroyed something in the educational community while you're there, it could be as simple as, you need to apologize to your class that you did something, or it could be something that has to do with community service or otherwise. There are other things that we can employ. I think the bigger problem, and just so everyone understands, is that by statute, the two things that we have for discipline in our, in our tool chest is, the only thing people ever hear about are detentions, in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and expulsion, all of which are defined by statute. I would hope that one day we don't have to have all of those disciplinary consequences. And there's things that we could do on a more restorative side, and how we can restore what has been, either disrupted, and we can bring students, instead of bringing them to court or bring them to the police, maybe we just are able to use our diversion programs, our restorative practices, and use our JRB, so students and families don't have any more interaction with our court system. And that's how we can try our best and keep working on it to avoid that school to prison pipeline.
Thank you. Chief Cota, this question is for you. You had mentioned this evening that 12% are females. Are those females of color?
No, they are not.
Okay. Next question. I'm gonna ask this question and then ask the panel to wave their hand on who would like to take this one. Ansonia is a very white community, not just demographically, but in every business, every organization, profit and nonprofit. How do you imagine this changing to promote equity, equality, etc.? Who would like to first answer that? Open it up to the whole panel. If you all wave at once, it makes it really hard for me to choose, so.
I'll try
Chief
to.
Cota?
Yeah, so I think as we've talked about, it begins with recruiting, talking to our community, looking at our community, our makeup, and moving toward that. As I said before, we're always looking to make our police force more diverse, but it boils down to getting people interested in, and I'll speak for the police side, I can't speak for employment at the schools or anything else, is we've got to open up communication to allow people to see what it is we do, get them to understand it, to make them feel comfortable enough to say, you know what, that is a job, that's a position or a career that I would like to have. So that it's incumbent upon us at this point to get that word out to our community, not necessarily also to just somebody just fill out an application. I'll just fill this out and see what happens. We've got to get people to see what we're about, what our community is about, and in this instance, our police department, and build that interest so that they do want to come and become part of our police department. It's the things that we've heard over the years as police officers, and even going back to Chief Hale. It's very difficult to want to police your own community, someplace you grew up in. You went to school with a large group of people. You've known a lot of people. So it's difficult because you may be called into resolve a dispute, resolve an issue, even make an arrest with somebody you know, even a possibility of a family member. We would have to look at that. So we have to work at letting people in and see what we're about in the city, and make it worth their while to come on board and say, yeah, I want to be part of my community. I want to be a police officer. I want to be a teacher. I want to work. I want to maybe go work at City Hall or something. So it's incumbent upon us, the leaders of our organizations, to keep the door open, keep the phones ringing, and tell them who we are and what we do and why they should come, why people should come and be part of our services in the city that we provide.
Dave, if I could jump on as well, just to piggyback.
Yes.
The stronger our schools are, and I'll give you an example. We have a Future Teachers of America program, one of the only Future Teachers of America program in the state, but we have one. We're the first one in the Valley, and we need to highlight, and not because Malika is on this, but when people see a student like a Malika Mosley, parents then say to themselves, if we have strong schools and strong programs, and then strong students that come out, they are the best advocates for how we can change the landscape of our community. I mean, and how does the fabric of our community get stronger, and how does it look more vibrant, and how do the colors look more vibrant? And just what we can do is by growing some of our own talent, but also highlighting the talent and the good that we do have. Oftentimes we spend so much time saying the things that we don't have, or we need more of, but sometimes it prevents us from seeing the good that we have and the people. And if we highlight the good, people are attracted to the positive. And that's something that we need to do, is take a look at those strong teachers, those strong students, those strong pillars in our community. When we look at those strong programs, and hopefully one day have unbelievably strong schools as strong as our football program, what I would like to say, if we could, people will look at the good and then say, I want to be a part of that. And what is that? That's why we're called the Ansonia Strong. That's the reason. And I want people to know what that reason is. And if it starts from their school, It's from their upbringing, from all the way on up, but it's throughout our community. So that's my piece, and I believe it, and I believe we have that strength within our community, and we need to highlight that good and feed off it.
Thank you. I want to give one last opportunity. Any other panelists want to respond to that question? Okay, next question. Chief Coda. With recent Chief Coda and Sonia Police Department, Chief of Police. With recent Black Lives Matter events occurring across the country in regards to police brutality among Black and people of color, what is Ansonia and surrounding communities doing to address this issue and ensure that it does not happen in your backyard?
Well, I think that the first thing we're doing is we're working, and I'll speak again for Ansonia. We are working toward making our police officers more cognizant of social issues and concerns of like that. Last year, we sent all our officers off to de-escalation training. Some went to a second class. So we realized, how can we go into a situation and calm it down so it doesn't escalate into something that could turn tragic or could be worse. So we're trying to give officers those tools to be able to bring situations down so that it doesn't escalate to an issue where there are uses of force. So that's a part of that. Education, training, communication, getting our officers out and speaking to our public, letting, when you speak to more people in your city, in your town, you build a bond, you build a connection there, and that connection in itself can help calm some situations down, or allow you to say, hey, so-and-so, you can call them by name, and we can address things without it moving toward an issue where there may be, as I said, a use of force. But it boils down to training, education, and also bringing our officers, talking to them about it. I'll go back early on. We have to keep this in the forefront of talking to our officers, respect, dignity, civility to people. When you say that enough and you mean it, then that's how you continue to move forward, bring about change, and keep the good moving forward within your organizations. I was asked a question when I was trying to get this job to be chief. I was already an officer, and he said, well, the culture of your police department, what drives that? Well, the answer is the leaders of the organization drive it. If I don't stand up and say, this is how we're going to do this, this is how we expect our police officers to treat our citizens, then I'm failing all the officers in the department. And that's not fair to them, and it's also not fair to the community. So that's how we do this. We have to look at situations, recognize if they're wrong or they're being handled wrong, and make those adjustments, get our people trained, get them updated on the proper ways to handle these, and move forward in a positive direction.
Thank you, Chief. Next question is for three of you, and it's the Chief, Superintendent, and Clergy. Nikki, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to have you speak next, and the question for all three of you. Seeing the atrocity we witnessed in Minnesota, and we heard Mr. Breon Sanders speak to George Floyd, how has Black Lives Matter changed you as a leader, including how to be more transparent? And that question, I'll ask Nikki to start, and then I'll follow up with the Superintendent and Chief Coda.
For myself personally, it has encouraged me to continue in my own congregation, at least, preaching regularly about social justice and about racism, specifically naming it, not just when something like this murder happens, but to continue and make that part of the culture of conversation. Additionally, as a leader, it's helped me to look at my community and step back from things, to not take a position that I'm actually not the best suited for, or when I'm leaving a position to train and bring up somebody who would be phenomenal, but otherwise is probably going to be overlooked or not even apply for that kind of position of leadership in a largely white community or system. But the biggest thing, it's made me look at myself, acknowledge where I need to listen, where I need to apologize, and where I need to do better.
Thank you, Pastor Nikki, again, President of the Valley Interfaith Council. Ansonia Superintendent Joe DeBacco, again, with the recent Black Lives Matter events occurring across the country, I lost her. Seeing the atrocity, the George Floyd atrocity we witnessed in Minnesota, how has Black Lives Matter changed you as a leader, including as a leader to be more transparent? Dr. DeBacco.
I can tell you, it was a difficult, something very difficult to watch. I remember, just so everyone knows, I had to tell my oldest daughter, who is 7, I have 7, 5, and 1. I kicked her out of the room, and she said to me, "Daddy, did that man die?" And I have to tell you, it brought me back to about 12 years old, when I watched Rodney King on TV, and I just instantly, I got upset because I don't think much has changed in 30 years. And that bothered me. So, and it said to me, "Joe, what am I going to do as a leader?" It bothered me to like my core. To have your daughter ask you that and said, "Can that happen to somebody we know and we love?" And said, "So what does it do to me as a leader?" It really compelled me in my role as an educator to say, how can I make sure, and what could I do for the youth to provide them with the skill set to make sure that their voices get heard, instead of just, there's times you can go on Facebook and say things into the ether, but how can I maybe take a look at curricular items and saying, this is how you advocate for justice, and how do I make them more civic minded, and how do I get them more civically involved? And so I looked at it myself and said, what could I do better? And how can I make things stronger? And how could I make our students better advocates for change? And that's really what I looked at. And I had to look at myself. What do I represent? And can I be helpful? And in which ways can I help? And for me, as an educator, I always fall back to the teaching component. Can I provide a time and a place, and can I provide the setting to give students throughout their educational career the skill set to be the best civic advocates? And how can they speak for social justice? And how can they do it so their voice is heard? So that's something I looked at for myself, and how I can do and how I could be better. But I'm always seeing what I could do more. But that's immediately, what I saw and I felt between dealing with my own feelings, my own family, and speaking from my heart, saying that I'm still mad and still upset, but the only thing I could do with that anger in my belly is saying, how can I use it to teach? Because that's what I do know, and I hopefully we can help students be better advocates for social justice and change.
Thank you, Chief Cota. Again, the question, seeing the atrocity, the George Floyd atrocity we witnessed in Minnesota, how has Black Lives Matter changed you as a leader, including a leader to be more transparent?
I think the first thing that we had to do as law enforcement is recognize what occurred there, that what occurred there was wrong. Simply put, it was wrong, and that type of activity is not acceptable. What it's done, and I'm going to thank Diane Stroman here, because I reached out to Diane. We had a few rallies within, in Ansonia with our young adults. They came and we were there, we were present, we had conversation, and I reached out to Diane. I said, what can we do? How do we get to our community, not just our older people in our community, but our young community, to make sure that we've opened up the door to realize that we're not separate. I always say that the police are the community. We are part of our community in Ansonia. So And she said, well, give me a couple days. Let me think about this. And then I was brought on board to come on and start with some of your meetings in the Martin Luther King Committee. And this came out of it. This one of the first steps. And I think that this is what's allowed us to become somewhat more transparent. Is there's another outlet. I can do things as just as a police department and invite people in and go present myself and show up at things. But this gives me another avenue to speak to such a wide range of people that have different perspectives, because that's the key. I have a perspective as a police officer. Dr. DeBacco has one as a superintendent. Breon has one as a youth pastor, and Pastor Harvell has the same thing. So we can all do that. It makes us transparent, but also makes us think about, is what we're doing the right thing, or how do we improve? So I'm going to echo as Dr. DeBacco said, we have to look at this and say, all right, how do we make things better? What can we do? Is there education? Is there community activities that we can do to prevent a tragedy like that from occurring in the future? And I think that's what we're doing. This is transparent. We're sitting here in front of a group of about 30 attendees plus the panel. So that event was a catalyst to bring about transparency within our own city of Ansonia. So I think that's unfortunately, out of tragedy, there is positive coming out of this in our little 6.1 square mile city. And I think it's the beginning of something that's going to work very well for us to move forward to build common bonds here.
Thank you, Chief. And just doing a time check, panelists, we have 7 minutes remaining. And for our 30 plus attendees, again, if we may not be able to get to all the questions, but I really want to underscore the work of the committee, that this is the beginning of a dialogue. This is the beginning of many series of future opportunities like this for Q&A, and really moving that needle towards appropriate discourse and making progress. Question for you, Dr. DeBacco, Superintendent, Ansonia Public Schools. Question tonight: are there trainings being set up for the staff from the Board of Education regarding racial diversity that will take place more than once a year for 1 hour?
The simple answer is there will be trainings. And if you're asking me, it's going to happen right now. I'm not saying right this day, because I'm doing our professional development, and I don't even know what the start of the school year is going to look like. So I can tell you that trainings on racial sensitivity, understanding, and also looking at de-escalation, like the chief of police said, but all of those trainings have been mentioned. Social emotional trainings, also understanding where kids are coming from, trauma-informed decisions. These are all the trainings that we have slated. So the answer is yes. In its immediacy, I can't say it's going to happen tomorrow or the next day, but the answer is yes, and it's slated for the future. And it's not a one and done deal. It's an ongoing conversation.
Chief Coda, that question is also posed to you as well. Are there trainings being set up for the staff from the police department regarding racial diversity that will take place more than once a year for an hour?
I'm going to echo Dr. DeBacco. Yes, there are currently, as officers get recertified, there are already classes set up through the post. Post is the Police Officers Standard and Training Council that we currently get for our recertification. But in addition, as a result of the upcoming or the recently passed Police Accountability and Transparency Bill, there'll be more training through that. We will continue to look at training classes as they become available to do that, to continue with this learning curve or bringing us additional information. I've talked to Greg Johnson about bringing in some of his trainers. So yes, we're looking toward that. We plan to do it But again, we are always moving, striving toward learning new things. The de-escalation is also part of that, is learning how to deal with various community members. So yes, it will be more than 1 hour. It's an ongoing process, and we will continue to move forward. One, comply with state regulations, but add additional training that we can get to bring into the police department as moving toward the future.
Thank you. And last question, and Chief Cota, for you. Are there protocols in place if an employee is found being prejudiced or discriminatory of residents?
So there are protocols. Obviously, we have a way that if a person felt that they were treated poorly or discriminatory, treated in a discriminate manner, they could file they would file a complaint through the police department. We would look into that. In certain instances, depending on what the findings are, they have to be reported to the state. Again, this police accountability and transparency statute has also given some more background on how you would handle those in the event that you were able to sustain that. There are different avenues up to and including the possibility of bringing it before the Police Officers Standard and Training Council for them to look at the certification of police officers to make a determination on that. So the initial answer is yes, they can file a complaint, come in and would have to be looked at, and then we would see what avenue it would take us, or the direction it would take us from there.
Thank you, Chief. And with the remaining 2 minutes, again, for our attendees tonight, really want to thank you for submitting the questions live tonight, as well as the many that submitted them ahead of time over the last 10 days. Again, this is only the beginning. Our commitment is to building a momentum to have these very honest, authentic, meaningful dialogue and engagement. I'm going to end with a number. Again, there's some questions here that will not be able to pose tonight, but we will carry these questions forward. They will not go unheard, nor not responded to. And I'd like to end tonight again with three of the. There was some comments as well to you panelists for your courage and your authenticity tonight. And I'm going to end with that in a way of thanking each of you for taking this time and your commitment to really wanting to meaningfully move the needle of progress on these very complex issues that are affecting people's lives, and people are dying as a result in these scenarios. So the first one is thank you for all you're doing for this and your continued leadership on these important issues. Secondly, I'm looking forward to the next event. This was an informative conversation. And lastly, I'll end tonight with thank you all. This was very informative and eye-opening. Thank you. Please do it again. And with that, we will end tonight's MLK Unity in the Community event. Thank you.
Goodbye. Good night, everybody.